Hello everybody, my name is Josh and welcome to the bonus video for the Super Mario Brothers playthrough. This is a interesting video. I'm going to be trying something a little bit different for this bonus video, but basically we're just going to go over unused stuff in Super Mario Bros. We're also going to go over, development and whatnot, exactly what happened in the game's development and whatnot. So let's get started with, of course, the game's early development. Now, unlike Sonic 2, there isn't really as much. There's some images here and there of early concepts and whatnot, but besides that, there isn't actually much to go on here. So let's just get started with the development of Super Mario Bros. 1. So, the game started development in 1984 alongside The Legend of Zelda. It was released on the Famicom after about a year of development on September 13th, 1985. In the US, on October 18th, 1985, it got a re-release for the Famicom Disk System, which is a very special type of console. We'll get into what the Famicom Disk System is in the next playthrough. On February 21st, 1986, and it was released in PAL regions, so Europe and Australia and whatnot, on May 15th, 1987. So, quite a big gap between the US release and the PAL release there, and this was also back in the day where games didn't have a worldwide release. They usually would be released in Japan first, and would be released in the US a couple months later or so, and then possibly in a PAL region like a year later or so. Usually to get, differences in PAL region consoles done, because back in the day, PAL region consoles only ran at 50 Hz, while NTSC consoles, which are usually Japanese and American, ran at 60 Hz, but generally didn't look as good as their PAL counterparts. So there was generally more work needed to optimize the game for PAL systems, which is usually why PAL region releases ended up being quite a bit later. So yes, the game started development as a generic Famicom title, and it originally started a rectangle which was 16 pixels wide and 32 pixels tall. So at this point the game was in so early development that they didn't even have a main character yet. It was just a rectangle. At this point in the game's development you couldn't even jump. So it was really just, movement. The idea to use Mario only came about when Mario Bros, the arcade game, was a massive success, and Takashi Tezuka proposed using Mario as the main character to Shigeru Miyamoto, and the rest is history after that point. When Mario became the main character of Super Mario Bros., everything changed. At various points in development, the game had many different gameplay styles, and it changed constantly, including a focus on shooting rather than platforming, with Mario being able to carry weapons such as a rifle and a beam gun. That would have been very different. It kind of, gives me an idea of, like Shadow the Hedgehog or something. The original control scheme was also very different, with up on the D-pad being used to jump, while the A button was an attack button. That would have sucked, because, it's not a very nice thing to do. The game also had sky segments which involved Mario inside a rocket and shooting enemies. Apparently the Coin Heaven is a remnant of this idea, although Super Mario Land would later use this original idea in its final level, and the game would also scroll screen by screen instead of continuously. At one point, the game was to be called Mario Adventure, at least for the US release. This is supported by a brochure for the arcade port calling it Versus Mario Adventure, further supported by this title, Mario Adventure, being registered in the US Copyrights Office, with the same register number also being used to the final title, Super Mario Bros. Let's have a look at some concept art now. We're going to transition to this lovely screen here, which shows that at some point in development, Yoshi was considered to be in the game. However, this was quickly removed due to technical limitations of the NES, and the idea was shelved until better hardware came along in which the idea could be properly utilized. Now, Yoshi, there's actually concept art of this idea. You can see it on your screen right now. It's a really great artwork, actually, and really shows that how different Super Mario Bros. Could have been. Now, we also have a special little thing here. We have a few images that are going to scroll through in a moment. I'm just going to bring it up here. Okay, so these three images are going to scroll through right here. These three images are early sprites of Mario that were shown on an episode of Capital, released in 1994. And we also have some other early sprites, I believe. I forgot to note these in. Let me just put these in here for a moment. We also have some extra early sprites from the 30th anniversary interview for Super Mario Bros. An interesting little tidbit of information here. It's kind of hard to find as none of my photos have actual names on them. It's this one here, I believe. Yes. This image here. So we're going to transition over again, and the next image that you'll see, which I think is the next one, so we got Capital. So yeah, these first three images are from the Capital episode. And then we have this image, not that image, but the next image, which was shown off in the 30th anniversary interview, which also showed more early sprites for Mario. So, you know, interesting stuff right there. Okay, so the next little bit of information we're going to look at for Super Mario Bros. Development is unused music found in the game's files. Now, unlike other video games where, you know, unused music is much more interesting, you know, Sonic 2 has pretty much an entire soundtrack that's different compared to its final release. Super Mario Bros. Only has 2 unused music tracks in it. These are track 10 and track 18 in the game's data. So we're going to start off with track 10, which is an alternate version of the game over theme with different, more plunkier sounding instruments. Have a listen. What an interesting take on the game over theme instead of the more usual, less plunkier sounding one. But in general, that's just an alternate version of a theme that's already in the game. Track 18, on the other hand, is a hurry-up variation. So hurry up being, you know, the game, you have 100 seconds left on the timer, and the game's like, hurry up, you need to get to the end. And this is a hurry-up variation of the short clip that's played when Mario enters an underground or underwater level, such as 1-2, 2-2, 4-2, or 7-2. As the timer is reset between levels, this version of the theme is never used. However, it's possible that these levels originally required you to walk into the pipe manually, leading to the need for the hurry-up theme here also. Take a listen. Blum, blum, blum. So that being said, those are the only 2 bits of unused music that we actually have in Super Mario Bros., unfortunately. There isn't really much more in terms of unused music. I mean, the rest of the music's... Okay, so let's talk about some unused objects in the original Super Mario Bros. So we start off with this lovely item right here, which is supposedly an object that's supposed to be climbable. It apparently makes a buzzing sound as it is climbed. If it is hacked into the game, it appears like this, which is just the top of the flagpole, the ball at the top of the flagpole. Really, really, really interesting. Also, for stuff that we don't have any sort of images or anything for that we can showcase, an unused type of firebar also exists in the game's code that spins fast but counterclockwise. This variant, however, is never used in the game, with a fast clockwise version being used, but not a counterclockwise version. There's also a normal speed clockwise and a normal speed counterclockwise version, as well as one that's a lot longer than the others. We also have an unused timer setting in the game that sets the timer at 200 seconds at the start of a level, as well as a setting that sets it at 0 seconds. The 0 second setting is used in intros where the timer is completely disabled. If the timer setting for 0 is used in a level itself, Mario will just die at the start of the level. He won't actually, you know, be able to do anything because the timer has technically finished. So it turns out that one of the many unused things in Super Mario Bros. 1 is Lakitu's behavior. Turns out that Lakitu doesn't actually function the way he's supposed to in the finished game. I have a nice little save state right here of the base game, vanilla game, no patches here, and we're going to show you the actual difference between the two, between what we have in the base game and what his intended behavior actually is. So, I'll make sure that I've actually got my controls correct before. Okay, so we enter World 4 here, because World 4 is his level, and this is how Lakitu works in the vanilla game. He chucks... he pretty much just chucks them straight down. It doesn't really chuck them relative to anything, he just kind of throws them out. Which is a problem, because he can't really hit me here. So, that's the thing. However, and I'm going to take a moment here to switch my ROM file quickly. If you go over to the lovely website called The Cutting Room Floor, you can see a nice little, extra little tidbit of content. And you can get this patch, which this patch can be patched over pretty much any copy of the game. And it will cause Lakitu to use his spiny shells and use his, physics and whatnot the way he's actually supposed to use them. So if we jump into World 4.1 here, we now have a patched ROM. There's no sound coming out, but I can't be bothered to fix that right now. That's fine. So that was different. So if I start running here, you'll find out that yes, Lakitu is throwing out spinies relative to my speed. So the actual intention for Lakitu's physics and behavior was that he was supposed to throw the spinies relative to Mario's current speed. And knowing that makes this level much harder than it is in the base game. I'm going to try and beat it here. It's kind of difficult to do, because the change in the spinies physics and Lakitu's physics and how they work is different. Yeah, so they're thrown out relative to where Mario is, with the intention being that when you're running at full speed, you would run right into Lakitu. Now, unfortunately, this behavior for Lakitu ended up being bugged in the final release, and we got how Lakitu throws his spinies in the base game, which causes 4.1 and 6.2, I think, is another Lakitu level, to become easier levels in general because of the behavior shift. However, you can patch the game. The patch file is on the Cutting Room Floor's Super Mario Bros. Page. I will link it in the description if you're interested in trying out the game with the intended Lakitu behavior. So with that being said, that is the intended Lakitu behavior. Throwing out the spinies relative to Mario's speed so that he can be more of a threat. Also unused in the game's files is pipe behavior. The L-shaped pipes that you see in the introduction for underground and underwater levels are actually able to be entered from the top. You just never see this behavior because they are the scenes where the L-shaped pipes appear are cutscenes instead of actual playable segments. Ironically, in this image here from Mario 2, The Lost Levels, there is an L-shaped pipe in World 9.3 that works as the original L-shaped pipe was supposed to. Finally, before we get into, the usual version differences and whatnot in Super Mario Bros. Between the various versions of the game, we finally have some last little unused stuff. There's no real category for these last few things. These are just really weird oddities. So we start off here with just a whole assortment of unused tiles, mainly background tiles. Looks like there's some pipe tiles here. There's question mark blocks and whatnot. Various types of blocks, question mark blocks, brick blocks, activated blocks, disabled blocks, etc. Looks like there's mushroom platforms, trees possibly in the bottom there, some bushes, and just a whole assortment of stuff really. That's just a whole bunch of background information that is just there that was just never used, unused tiles. It seems like a lot of these tiles are mainly just, alternate colors of what we actually have in game. They're all very brown, while the final game is a lot more yellow and orange and whatnot. So, yeah, that's fun. Also, on the other end of things, turns out that bloopers actually have the ability to be above water as well. Now, you only ever see bloopers underwater in Super Mario Bros. 1, but this screenshot here, specifically from the Minus World, what a great segment of the game, the Minus World, which is done by doing a glitch in World 1-2 to glitch the game out into thinking that you're going to World 32, I believe it actually is. That shows up as a blank space in the game starter. And that loads up the Minus World as we know it as now. And Minus 3, in I think the FDS version, has above ground bloopers in it. Now, above ground bloopers actually give 1,000 points if stomped on, and they work perfectly fine. So, given that this behavior for bloopers appears naturally in the sequel, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, it was most likely a completely intentional design choice that they just never used. And finally, of course, we have version differences. Different versions of the game have been released over time. Generally, we start off, of course, with different versions, different international versions of the base game before we move into other variations. So, of course, we have the NTSC versus the PAL release. Now, if you don't know what NTSC versus PAL means, NTSC is basically any version of the game in Japan, America, and Korea, I believe, is pretty much always NTSC. PAL is pretty much everywhere else. Generally, Europe and Australia are the most common, but pretty much everywhere else is PAL. So, the biggest change on the PAL release is that back in the time of Super Mario Bros., PAL TVs actually had a slower refresh rate of 50 Hz compared to NTSC TV's higher refresh rate of 60 Hz. As such, the original PAL release had mostly just had small little changes to adapt to the slower refresh rate of PAL TVs at the time, but it also had some bug fixes, as at the time, PAL releases generally did not come out until later on, unlike nowadays where pretty much the game has a worldwide release. Back in the day, Super Mario Bros. On PAL regions didn't come out until 1987, as I said at the start, while releasing in early 1985 everywhere else. So, the first bug fix, and we're going to have two images here for pretty much all of these. The first bug fix that we have an image for here, for the PAL release, is the underwater section. So the image on the left is the NTSC release, and the image on the right is the PAL release. And this bug fix is pretty self-explanatory. The PAL release is the first version of the game to place a block above the exit pipe in underwater areas. The reason for this is because if you were Super Mario or Fire Mario, you could actually glitch behind the pipe and softlock the game. So adding the block in the PAL releases makes it so that you can't actually jump behind it. Our next little image right here is taking into account World 8-2 right here. Once again, NTSC is on the left and PAL is on the right. For some reason, I'm not sure what the reasoning was, but they decided to change the starting positions of the Koopa Paratroopers in World 8-2 for some reason. I don't know why they decided to change it, but they did. So, there you go. There's just a really odd choice there. Interesting choice right there. These next two things we don't have images for, but it's pretty self-explanatory. The international releases have a game-breaking bug where the flagpole or trampolines are loaded under the same jurisdictions as enemies and power-ups. Meaning if there was a lot of enemies or power-ups on screen, they wouldn't load at all. This was actually fixed in the PAL release by making the loading come off of a different jurisdiction. Bloopers. The lowest position of bloopers was lowered by 4 pixels in underwater stages in the PAL release, allowing them to actually hit Super Mario or Fire Mario when they walk along the ground. And there's just a whole bunch of other just small changes in the PAL release, mainly regarding airspeed, but as well as enemy hitboxes. Just to make you know, the PAL release is generally the bug fixed release. It's like the version 1.2 of a game or something. There are also 3 different multi-carts for Super Mario Bros. Back in the day, the NES had a lot of multi-carts, which they would have multiple games on one cartridge. The first of these is Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt, which was a multi-cart with just one small change. They changed a pointer regarding the jump. in Super Mario Bros. This might have something to do with putting both games on one cartridge. I don't know. The next multi-cart release was Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt and World Class Track Meet. And this version of Super Mario Bros. Was based on the international release, so the NTSC release. Finally, the last multi-cart is Super Mario Bros. And Tetris and World Cup. And this version of Super Mario Bros. Was based on the PAL release. Okay, here we have an interesting little tidbit right here. The Nintendo World Championships, done back in 1990, had Super Mario Bros. As one of the 3 games that was available on the very special, unique cartridge used to the event. And the event itself included just a few small changes to accompany for the fact that they were playing 3 games over a small time limit. The Nintendo World Championships is a really cool little piece of information, and for the tournament they actually created a unique cartridge for it, and Super Mario Bros. Was the first game that they played. And the first one here is the title screen. On the left we have the base game, the normal game, and on the right we have what appears on Nintendo World Championships card. So the first one obviously is that there is no options at all on the main menu. You can't pick a 2-player game, and you can't see the overall score, although the Mario score at the top is still there, but you can't see the top score as seen on the screen. Also, another interesting little thing that we had was the amount of lives that you get started off with. So in the base game, you start with 3 lives. For Nintendo World Championships, they start you with 99. I don't think you need 99 lives for Nintendo World Championships, but that was something they did. So there you go. Finally, in Nintendo World Championships, the game ended when you collected 50 coins and then moved on to the next game, which was Rad Racer. After the Rad Racer part, they would finish the Rad Racer part, which I think was just completing the first course, and then you would move on to Tetris, and the remaining amount of time left on the cartridge, which you would set by flicking some switches on the cartridge, would be done playing Tetris to just try and get as much of a high score as possible. Finally, so the last unique version of Super Mario Bros., not talking about ports like the Game Boy Color port or anything, is the Anniversary Edition, which was released on the Virtual Console for the 25th anniversary. Only on specifically bundled Wiis, however. All this game does, however, is it simply changes the question mark blocks to have the number 25 on them instead of a question mark. That's it. Like, there's not much more to it than that. It's just that. And with that being said, that is everything regarding Super Mario Bros. Development as we know so far, basically. Unused stuff and whatnot in the game's data, the game's development, which we really don't know much about at all, beta stuff, which is there's next to nothing. Super Mario Bros. Is one of those games that is just really interesting, and it's really interesting because there's not a lot of info that we actually know about it. So that's everything we've got right now, including version differences and whatnot. That's just usual. With that being said, my name has been Josh. This is the end of the Super Mario Bros. Bonus video and the end of the Super Mario Bros. Playthrough as well. So with that being said, I hope you all have enjoyed this playthrough. The next playthrough will be coming out hopefully soon. I'm gonna love the next playthrough. So until then, my name has been Josh, and I will see you all for the next playthrough. Goodbye.